Would it be foolish to quit your job and follow your entrepreneurial dream without knowing if anybody cares about your amazing idea? Because it is possible that nobody cares at all about your idea. Entrepreneurship, raising funds, 0 to 1, it all sounds so exciting. But there are many downsides that rarely get discussed. What happens to the entrepreneurs that risk everything and fail? What happens to their mortgage, their families, and all of their financial responsibilities? Does it make sense to validate that the market actually cares about your idea before going all in? Because way too many founders do not do this. But you know who does know about this? Oliver Palmer, the founder of DQ Ventures. DQ Ventures helps entrepreneurs through this validation process. And because the Asia Tech podcast wants to help entrepreneurs succeed, we invited Oliver on the show so he can tell us how DQ Ventures helps entrepreneurs. Let's welcome Oliver to the show now. Before we jump in, let's thank the sponsor of this episode, Dr. Tech. Dr. Tech can help you build your e-commerce store and start selling quickly online and on social media in just a few days. And Dr. Tech stores are gorgeous, modern, and responsive. They are fully customizable and simple to use. Dr. Tech stores have hundreds of included optimizations that will help you sell more online, and a support team that can answer all of your questions. With Dr. Tech, there are no hidden costs, no commissions on sales, no add-ons to buy. Everything is included in one simple subscription. So go to hellodr.tech/ATP to get a free trial and start building your store. You can find the link in the description below. Also, Dr. Tech is offering a special deal to the listeners of the Asia Tech podcast. After your free trial, you can get your first full month for only $1. To get this deal, simply type ATP into the live chat and they will send you a special promo code. Thanks again to Dr. Tech for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the show. Not very many people are out there that actually build a company, bootstrap it, raise some money, and then sell it. So my first two questions are this, right? What made you go out and raise the money? Like, your business was doing well, it sounds to me, right? Like, your business is doing super well. So you said strategic. So why did you guys go out and raise the money? Like, what was that conversation like? Because I have this conversation with my co-founder all the time. We're like, could we grow faster if we had more money? But if we have more money, then we got to answer to that guy about why we're doing what we're doing or not doing. And do we like not having to answer to anybody except each other, which is hard as well? Like, why would you guys go out and do that? What was the thought process there?
So
first of all,
the interesting thing from our perspective was one, we were founded in Australia, so we were based in Australia. We opened a London office in 2007, and we opened an office in New York in 2008. So we had sort of Sydney, London, New York, providing digital mobile development services and consultation to a range of clients. And in those early days, we were sort of at the forefront of innovation. We were leading the way. We hired super smart people. We were kind of perceived by some large corporates as the tech company that kind of knew how to navigate this new world of mobile. And we were kind of really building some pretty incredible apps. We launched newspapers for the first time ever on the iPad. We worked with The Economist to get them onto the iPad. We worked globally with Time Out to get them onto mobile devices. So some really, really big things. And then, a lot of other companies kind of cottoned on to the fact that mobile was just software, and it was an interface that people were going to use, and it was going to get more and more popular. And we found that some of the bigger jobs that we knew we were at the table and we were involved in the conversations, but then they would go to IBM's mobile team or Accenture's team. And our feeling was that we were just, there were a few companies out of the States that had raised, tens of millions of dollars, even hundreds of millions of dollars. And we felt that if we kind of continued to grow at this organic kind of sort of rate, we'd lose pretty quickly, and we would no longer be able to kind of maintain a position of doing some of these amazing jobs that we knew we were capable of. And so the rationale at the time was really that we wanted a big brother. We wanted someone who kind of could back us. And so whenever we were sitting at the table with some of these big banks or big media companies, it was sort of a case of, it's not just Tiger Spike, it's Tiger Spike backed by the larger strategic. So that was really the rationale for us, just because, technical obsolescence is always a challenge in any tech company. You're worried that somebody else is going to do something better, faster, cheaper. And our feeling was that we were right at the forefront of that, but we didn't necessarily have the kind of the gravitas to win some of the jobs that we wanted to. So that was why we didn't just focus on raising money. We didn't just want investors. For us, it wasn't about putting an extra $10 million in the bank. It was really about getting some cash in to let us grow, but also having the resources of a strategic behind us to kind of move to the next level.
And did it change the way your business was running? Because this is a key question for me, right? Like I said this to you earlier. I talk to my co-founder all the time about this. Like, should we go out and raise money? Because our income is growing. Like it all looks really great. We feel like we're super investable, but we just are afraid, I guess is the wrong word, is concerned. Like if we do that, then do we lose control over the thing that we've built so far? And do we care? Like, what was it like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we had a quite different experience to a lot of companies who take on investment. I mean, we only sold a 25% stake. So
Yep.
it was a minority shareholding, which meant we still had control, but you still have an investor on board. You have someone else to answer to. The thing from our perspective was that they put a large amount of money. They put over 10 million US into our bank accounts and a bank
Wow.
account. And suddenly we went from, a couple of months salary in the bank and covering our costs to having an awful lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Good for
we
you.
opened offices in San Francisco. We opened an office in Dubai. We opened an office in Tokyo. And in San
Oh, wow.
Francisco, this was 2011. Facebook was 4 years old. Google was hiring engineers. We were paying a considerable amount of money to have a bunch of
Yeah.
employees sitting in a fancy office 2 blocks down, just next door to the Moscone Center in San Francisco, and it wasn't making any money. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
It sort of told
Yeah.
this Tiger Spike story because we had an office in San Francisco and it was all very exciting. And I think one of the challenges we had was our strategic investor. We were a relatively small cog in the grand scheme of things for them, and
Yeah.
there wasn't too much oversight over us. So for my business partner Luke he's a chartered accountant, and he was very focused on all the right things, and all the money got put into the business, but we put it into places that any seasoned investor would have just questioned within the first quarter.
Right.
They would have gone,
What are you guys
look at,
doing?
what are you doing?
What are you doing?
It sounds great, but we should have been in Boston, or we should have been in the places where the media companies and the large organizations were, but we were in the tech sort of
Yeah.
center of the universe. And there are a few other things. We had projects which we took on, sort of vanity projects, working in the Middle East with Emirates Airlines, which was
Yep.
amazing. But we put 30 engineers on this, and the money just wasn't. The imbalance was lost because we were no
Yeah.
longer kind of focused on revenue in and then cost below that. Suddenly we had this large pool of money and we could service these jobs. And I think that's one thing to be aware of when you do take money from VCs, is that a huge amount of oversight where they're counting the pens in the pen cupboard and worrying about how much paper you're ordering and watching every dollar is traditionally what you think is going to happen. But for us, it was almost the opposite. We actually could really have used sort of a wiser sort of someone who said, guys, if you spend this money here, it's going to go like this. If you sort of pour it down the drain over here, it's not going to help. So it definitely can be, it's really difficult. From our perspective, we were fortunate in that all the money went into the business. We didn't increase our salaries. We didn't suddenly kind of drive around in fancy cars, or as is happening, which I think that's very much to Luke's credit. He was really focused on, this is where the money's to be invested. And we were doing the things to the best of our ability. The challenge was it was the first time we'd been in a position where we could hire 5 engineers without worrying about winning 3 jobs. So I think, to answer your question, it's all these things you have to consider. It's where you want to end up as well. From our perspective, we felt that if we carried on organically, we would get outpaced by competitors in the marketplace and by larger organizations who'd kind of cottoned on to mobile. They realized it was going to be a big thing. So we were losing that sort of first mover advantage. We got the capital, we got the strategic backing, and it helped us win jobs that we wouldn't necessarily have won otherwise, because we were seen as a much larger organization. But we didn't really make that money work to be where it could have got to. And we were lucky in that about 18 months down the track, we sort of had that moment and those conversations, and it was somewhat of a challenge. And that was when we really took stock of where we were at and what capital we had and where we wanted to go to. And that was the reason then to bring on a financial investor, because we thought this is just going to keep happening. Mobile is so massive now. There were a number of there was a sort of big acquisition through sort of 14, 15, 16, and we wanted to be a part of that as well. And then that's when the financial investor had a sort of a 3 to 5 year horizon, and we thought, we sold 10% to them, and they wanted to make a reasonable return on their 10%, and that meant that what we owned obviously would be a reasonable amount as well. So those were the decisions we made. We sort of had a plan that we needed not to be outpaced and overtaken by everybody, and then we had a plan that we wanted to kind of get to the point where we'd had an exit and we'd sold the business. It was never our grandfather's guitar company that we wanted to keep forever and pass on to our children. It was really a tech company that had its moment in time.
So this is the other question for me, because people do ask me this all the time. They're like, "What's your exit strategy?" And I'm thinking to myself, my exit strategy is dying. Like that's really kind of, and you can ask me why, but like that's kind of what I feel like it is, right? Because if I look at what a mobile software company was doing, you're having impact all over the world, right? And you're continuously having an impact. Every time you build something new, whether it's for Financial Times or for some newspaper, you're literally doing the digital transformation that everybody's kind of squawking about. And that's real. You wake up every day and are having impact. So I get when you bring on a financial advisor, not a financial advisor, a financial investor, they're thinking, okay, 3 to 5 years, we exit, we can get our 4 or 5 times return. That I completely understand. But walk me through the process of building this thing from scratch with your co-founders and then going, I'm done. I'm happy to exit. Because I can't imagine doing that for mine. And every company's different, right? I'm just curious why. And then walk me through that process, because I think everybody dreams about this. Like, yeah, now I become rich and then you can have the fancy cars and stuff. But again, I don't think the mythology around that is the same as the reality of it. So walk me through that too, if you don't mind.
You're 100% correct. I think for us, the technology piece that we started, I mean, I was 28 when we started the company, 40 when it sold. So we were kind of right in this sort of tech bubble. We were sort of doing the exciting stuff that was happening in technology. I imagine, I mean, I was at university during sort of .com, 97, 98, 99. That excitement of building a website, of suddenly being able to display something to a global audience was super exciting. But you get to 2005, and I can knock up a website in 20 minutes and, I've got an email address and suddenly it's not as exciting as it was when I'm building a portal or doing something. And certainly from a founder perspective, that was my role. I was head of innovation. My job was to be at the forefront of what was happening in mobile. I remember I used to tell people we worked on color screen phones and they were like, wow, a color screen phone, right? Like you would know the Nokia 3210 when you play Snake on that blue screen and then suddenly they've started releasing, and then cameras on phones. My business partner sailed in the Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
Oh, wow.
And he was live blogging with the first 1 megapixel camera phone from Siemens. So we were getting quality images remotely from a yacht and sending them back, and it was being published live on the front page of a newspaper in Australia. So they were really kind of exciting and innovative projects. And then as the technology evolved, as the sort of the space we were in evolved, the exciting stuff, yes, it was digital transformation, it was amazing, but there were other people doing it and we weren't in that space anymore. So we had an innovation lab and we looked at new types of we looked at cryptography. We focused really heavily on kind of privacy and security around mobiles and little projects like that. But it was kind of not what the core of TigerSpike was doing. We had 400 people, big UI UX teams creating great experiences. And us as founders, I felt that it had grown beyond what I really wanted to be a part of. I didn't want to build a 10,000 person company. It wasn't going to get there. And the excitement was sort of, we actually had a conversation talking about taking it full circle. Like the actual excitement of exit, of selling the business really appealed to us. We thought not just whether you make lots of money or not so much money, but really just having gone from conception to building to, bootstrapping to getting investment and getting all that done, and then actually selling the business felt like the sort of experience that Luke and I particularly would just really enjoy. And so I remember having this conversation, we talked about it, and then as soon as that kind of seed gets planted, it's then when there's my exit plan. And I'd say prior to that, we didn't. I mean, when we first put our ESOP together, I remember, when we were talking about what it would mean to kind of the staff in the share options program, that we had the numbers going up to a sale for $1 billion, right? This is what the staff could get.
If we get to hear, this is what your thing is worth.
Wow. The chef's going to be a millionaire kind of thing. And so, that was definitely our mindset was, an IPO was a possibility, get to that. It wasn't so much a term back in those days, but that kind of unicorn status. And then when we sort of really sat down and thought about it and looked at where our business was and what we wanted out of it, it wasn't to be kind of constantly kind of just driving this big organization forward. It was to sort of take things full circle, gain that experience, and then look at what was next. And then we all felt that TigerSpike had kind of had this complete life cycle and that it was time for us to do something else. And from what you've said, not to offer any advice, but I think when you know what you're going to do for an exit, you'll know what you're going to do for an exit, right? And until then, you have no idea. And that's kind of the best way to think about it. And I think anybody who starts a business with a very clear idea on how they're going to get out is setting themselves up to fail. I just think that's not why you should get into a company in the first place.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think this idea of like starting a business and then saying, I know what my exit strategy is right at the beginning, I think is really silly, because why are you starting a business anyway? And I believe, and again, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, but like, I think if you're starting a business just to make money, and I know that sounds weird, you're probably starting the wrong business, right? Remember, we talked about this on the prep call. I said to you, any hardworking person can do anything really, really well, but to be great at something, you have to care about it. And if you don't care, you're not going to build something big, because somebody else is going to out execute you because they do care. And if you're operating in vertical X, whatever it is, the guy or the gal that's operating there because they care is just going to destroy you anyway.
Every time.
Yeah.
That passion and that kind of drive can't possibly be because you're going to make $1 million at the end of it.
No.
And that's one of the big things we talk about with DQ. We talk to executives who are on, $300,000 a year plus a bonus. And we'd say, if you started today and we built a great company and you worked for 10 years, and then exited, which is, that would be pretty good achievement, 7 to 10 years. It took us 12. Your return, whatever you end up with, has to be more than like $4 million, because you could not do it and still have $4 million. That's what you're going to earn over 10 years. And 25% of a $4 million, whatever you might own of a business after tax, the numbers just don't
add up.
Unless you really feel like you're passionately involved in solving a problem or changing people's lives, whatever it might be that gets you into the startup in the first place, the overriding reason definitely can't be money, because it's like might as well go and buy a lottery ticket and stay in your corporate job. It just doesn't make sense.
So I say two things about this, and again, I'm curious about your opinion. One is, I say everyone's an overnight success 10 years later. I picked 10 just because it feels like it's really far away. Right. Yeah. They're like, oh my God, look at this guy. He's just come out of nowhere. Yeah, he came out of nowhere. He came out of a hole he dug for himself 10 years ago. That's the first thing. And I forgot what my second point was going to be. But the other thing is, you're never going to make as much money as you do, like you said, in your job. And you have to build, this is the thing, right? You're going to want to build the thing you have to build. Right. Yeah. I feel like in my business, I don't want to build this business. I have to do it. Right. And when I talk to entrepreneurs, the best ones are the ones that are just like their whole life has been like this funnel that's dropped them down to building this thing. Yeah. And they're kind of like the only person that could do it and do it well. And that's how I know they're going to succeed. Does that make sense?
100%. And that kind of, that almost though, that you've got to get those blinkers on. You've got to be able to say, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm building. And you'll pivot and you'll move and you go in different directions and all of that sort of thing. But that drive, and I think also that passion for, like you said, not bringing on investor gives you the freedom to choose what you want to do. I mean, and I think that's very true. And even though if you're in a corporate job and no matter how senior you might be, you've always got your boards to answer and what have you. And whether you feel constrained, and our sort of contention is that if you do a startup, you're still going to have those. You've still got a partner. You've still got to make the payroll at the end of each month and that sort of thing. But you feel like every time you're doing something, you're creating something that's bigger than you are. And I think there's a lot of people we speak to, particularly in corporate roles, who kind of don't necessarily feel that they're making that much of a difference. They get it and it's all cool and they're doing the job to the best of their ability and what have you. But there is something to be said for, that passion and that kind of that drive and all the different hats you have to wear when you start a business. And then you find the ones that fit the best and you go down that path and you're still talking about it on a Saturday night and on a Sunday morning. And not that it needs to take over your life completely, but those tend to be, certainly from my experience, the founders that they're never selling, they're never trying to get you to sign up for anything, but they're just so enthusiastic and passionate about it that they want to tell you and they want to involve you in the conversation. And that to me is sort of the essence of a founder.
Yeah, I was on the phone with somebody earlier today doing a prep call, right? And this woman was so great at asking me questions. I just said to her, you should have your own show. And again, I wasn't selling to her, but I'm so passionate about this way to get information out there and to do the things that like a podcast allows you to do that I just started talking about it. And she was like, well, I am kind of thinking about it. And it's not selling per se. It's just me telling you why I'm so excited about the stuff that I do and why it works so well. I want to talk a little bit about DQ because I think this idea of don't quit is anti-mythology, right? It's like you have to spend 80 hours a week doing this thing or you're never going to build anything that matters, right? And I read a book once, it must have been 15 years ago, I think, called Little Bets. I wonder if you've read this book. If you haven't, you're living it, right? So maybe you don't need to read it.
I should
But the idea was that even a guy like Chris Rock, right, who does 45-minute specials on Netflix, he has a joke in mind and he'll go out with like 2 or 3 of these jokes and just like test them. Little bets, just make little tiny bets on these things and then accumulate it over a 6 or 9 month period of time. He'll then come up with a 45 or an hour long set based on crowd reactions and just testing like what it feels like to tell those jokes. And, you know, I think that this is true in the startup world too. And again, tell me where I'm wrong here, but like you do just a bunch of little things that you think are going to work. And when it does, then we used to say this on the trading desk, let your winners run and cut your losses like really fast. And also know, this is another thing I think that people don't understand about wagering and making bets, and I'm putting that in quotes, is that you need to know before you make the bet, what does success look like and where do I get out? Right? We used to say this, don't ever enter a position when you're making a trade, whether it's an equity trade or a fixed income trade, it doesn't matter, until you know where am I going to get out, right? And where am I going to exit if it goes the wrong way? Right. And those two things can't be balanced. Like you can't say it's going to go either 10% up or 10% down. It's got to be 10% up or 2% down because your winner has to succeed more than your losers. Anyway, these little bet things, what do you think about this?
Yeah, 100% correct. And that's exactly where DQ sits. I mean, if you're, 45, you've got a mortgage and, you're in a pretty good space and you've got the next 10, 15 years sort of mapped out. And you decide, I've got this brilliant idea. I'm going to revolutionize the, legal industry with this wonderful idea, and you quit your job and you kind of, your wife has to pick up the slack. You've got a year's worth of savings and you throw yourself into 80 hours a week. That's a big bet, right? You're pretty much betting your future, and you're putting it all out there. You're putting it all on, not even on black. You're probably putting it all on 16, and you're just hoping that 16 comes in. Exactly. And I just think fundamentally that's just too risky, and that's why the argument is that not many people do that. Not many people at 40 or whatever throw in their corporate job and do it. And the contention for DQ at the beginning was that that's a huge missed opportunity. That's a huge number of people who potentially have incredible, world-changing ideas that literally will never see the light of day because they can't make that big bet. And so where DQ sits is to come in and help them explore the idea in a little bet kind of way by understanding what the competitive landscape looks like while they still carry on doing what they're doing. Understand, is there a market for what their idea might be? And we see our success at DQ sometimes as we might work with someone for a month or so, and then they go, this is a crazy idea. Like, this is never going to fly. There's 5 other people doing the same thing. Like, I'm not going to make any difference. And they stay in their job. And that is brilliant, right?
That's a success for you, though. That's a win. That's a huge win.
That's brilliant. And that's kind of what DQ exists to do. It's to help you really understand what it is you're getting yourself into, both from the experiences that we've had, but also the nature of the industry and the type of business that you want to build. We've got, a bunch of people that we draw on to kind of really try and understand what the landscape might look like, to help you kind of incrementally move into a position where that business could stand on its own, and talk to investors about whether this is something they might want to put money into, whether we think it could be bootstrapped. All of those kind of options are on the table, but really fundamentally it's to help you kind of de-risk that journey towards being a founder by taking small steps rather than this big bang explosion. I quit my job, I remortgage my house, or I put my life savings into building a platform. I mean, that's just a really, really risky way of approaching startups.
Yeah, and also considering the average age of a successful entrepreneur is like 40 something years old, right? So
that's
it falls right into this category.
Yeah. All the research we have at the beginning is all around these kind of older founders and helping support that kind of process is where DQ sits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into this whole thing of like, I feel like I know, like the world is so much clearer to me today than it was when I was 25. And I think that's true for most people, right? We're like, when you're 25, you're just like, what is going on out there? And now you're just like, I got it kind of thing, right? At least you feel more comfortable. I want to ask you this though. A traditional venture capitalist, right? Everybody understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. So if you're a founder already, you know who the VCs are that you can potentially attempt to go to for funding.
Yep.
Right. But DQ is like on a different street, right? you're not in the same place as a typical venture capitalist person, not even per se at all,
No.
right? So where do you find the people to actually help, and I don't know what other word to use, advise,
Yeah.
right? How do they
Yeah.
find you? Do you know what I mean? Because if I'm sitting at my job, it's weird if I go out and find somebody to help me quit my job in 6 months or 9 months. You know what I mean? Like if my
Yeah.
company finds out about it, they're going to fire me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I know
100%.
you're
100%.
not. I know you're not trying to do that, right? You're not trying to ruin stuff. You're trying to build stuff, yeah. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how do you find the people that you want to help? And can I ask you this too? Because this is tricky. What characteristics do you think make a great founder? So first of all, source, and then
Yep.
what are you looking for? To be fair,
Yeah. So from a source perspective, I mean, at the moment, it's predominantly word of mouth. We get involved at a very early stage in a business, like you said, the 7 to 10 year horizon, and for the first 1 or 2 years, 6 to 18 months, we're your co-founder as a service. We do everything. We're talking kind of twice weekly or whatever it might be, and then ultimately we take a more advisory role. We get more involved in fundraising, that sort of thing. But we want to set the foundation, and then you're off to run your business. So we kind of recognize that the kind of people we want to get involved with are people we're going to have to stay in touch with for a long time. So
yeah,
when we're interviewing people, we want to be sure that she's someone we can actually have a conversation with in 6 months' time and try and understand that there's a dynamic between us.
yeah,
So we're a relative. It's not a sort of a broadcast advertising, throw us your CVs and tell us why you want to start a business. It's a moment. It's a lot more word of mouth, a lot more referral sort of stuff. So people will hear about us because sort of conversations. A lot of LinkedIn. A lot of people are sort of looking on LinkedIn. They've got their job profile up there, but they look at other things. And if they're interested or they've got an idea
yeah.
around a business, our typical founder is someone who's probably had their idea for this company for the last 2 or 3 years. They've spoken to their friends at the pub.
Got
They've
it.
chatted over glasses of champagne about how they should be doing this and how great
Right.
it is. And their friends have all said, "It sounds brilliant. You've got to do it. You've got to quit your job. It sounds wonderful." But they're on
Right.
a good gig, and then they start to sort of think, well, what could I do in this space? And that's where sort of DQ comes up. I mean, we sort of position ourselves around the sort of kind of venture studio, business accelerator, but we're very much trying to kind of do things in the background. So we're very conscious of kind of non-compete clauses and all the IP
Yeah, yeah.
associated with employment agreements, that kind of thing. But really, what we're about is trying to establish is there something in your idea? You've spoken to your friends about it. All of your friends have said, "Brilliant, go for it." But what's the reality? How can we help? So it's sort of it's definitely not a mass market broadcast. Come and start your company with us. It's much more, if you've had this idea and you're sort of a bit curious about where you might start. Often we crop up in kind of searches on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff, or
Got
we'll
it.
speak to people. If you're ready for VC and you want to start talking to VCs, we've like DQ's value is kind of, you've missed the boat with us, right? The value we add is before you get to that point, and we want to help you understand the right kind of seed capital or venture you go to, or a route that doesn't involve them, right? We're all about sort of rational startups as well. How do we get to a point that you can start to see a path to a profitable company, like exactly where I guess you've managed to get to.
I feel like you and I could talk about this for hours. So how do you finally tell somebody? Because if you're working with somebody, you meet this gal, right? She's got a great idea. You're working with her. She's got, like you said, a $300,000 a year job. Her husband has a good job or whatever. They're doing really well. And you're like, wait a second, now we've been working with you now for like 6 to 9 months. This thing is a thing.
Yeah.
Now you actually need to quit. Kind of like, when do you get to that point where you tell somebody, I'm not telling you how to live your life. This is a great idea.
Yeah.
And now that we've been working with you for, let's just say, a year, it doesn't really matter to me, right?
Yeah.
But if you really want to build this into something big, we think this could work.
Yeah.
What is
So
that? Like, how do you get there?
it's interesting. It definitely isn't, after module 6 of the program
No, no,
or
no, no, no. For
three
sure.
months down the track, right? Like I
Good.
wish it was. I wish it was as
Yeah, yeah.
formulaic as that. So I mean, we've started 18 companies in the 2.5 years we've been going. We've had 6 people quit their jobs and join. We've had about 20 or 30 where, outside of that 18, where we decided it's not the right thing. So that's
Yep.
sort of our ratio. Um, and it's different for different people. So 3 of the companies have raised external capital from angel networks. One raised 750,000, the other raised 450,000 pounds. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
the point where it's not just us. I mean, we try and be as realistic as possible, but we're obviously invested in the idea and we're very pro and it's great. But really, we look for external kind of validation of the idea. So the other one, they actually won 3 clients through us and through what they were doing, and that was enough to say people are
Yeah.
paying for this service, and it was relatively straightforward. The decision is has actually been relatively easy because the business is either going to be a success or it's going to fail. Because you're not weighing it up against your back's not to the wall, right? You're not kind of it's not make or break, which is good and bad. We like it because I think it's difficult to raise money if you still have a job. VCs will always tell you until you've
Yeah.
mortgaged
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
house and your life's not on the line. And we fully understand that. But we also understand that if we can set the environment and the foundation for you to be doing it and be all in on this thing, then it's successful. You've got a much, much better chance of raising capital from a VC than if you just quit and have a bit of an idea and a couple of PowerPoint slides and you try and raise money. So we're
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
about trying to move people along the path so that they're ready for capital, or they're ready to win another 10 customers or to open up in a new market and see the fruits of their labor grow organically at the start, because not all businesses need venture capital.
Yeah. We're struggling with this anyway. Meaning
The only other thing, the one
go
question
ahead.
you asked as well was just the traits. What sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
traits do
Yeah.
we look for? And I think that's a really interesting point, because I think you know a key thing is a supportive partner. You mentioned, husband's got a good job or whatever, that gives you the freedom to do it. And I think that's true of almost any venture you might want to try in life. But it does help
It
if
does.
you're the sole breadwinner and you're putting a family at risk and that sort of thing. Then the kind of the hurdles to jump and move across to running your own thing are definitely higher. So
Yeah.
we find that it's trying to get an understanding of what do you want to do. If you want to give this a shot and kind of make a go of it. If you're in your mid to late 40s, you're out of corporate life for 2 or 3 years, be aware that it might actually be quite difficult to get back in. So
Yeah.
you've just got
Almost
to
impossible, I would say, but yeah.
really difficult today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if and so even though the startup might be going really well and everything's wonderful, it's really trying to kind of weigh up that kind of future potential, because you just don't want to be in a position where your startup's gone bust, you've been 5 years out of the workforce, and you got to get a job at 58 or something.
Yeah.
So those are some of the risks, I guess, associated with this. But we're fully transparent, and the other thing people are weighing up is if you're 50 and you've got a brilliant idea and that working for another 10 years probably isn't going to get you to the point where your 501k is enough to support you or whatever else it is.
Yeah.
What else do you want to do? And so it might be that a startup can be that passion project that you can go through till you're 75, right? And you love it and you enjoy it and it's great fun. So those are another sort of some of the traits of the founders, is trying to understand the position they're in, the kind of where they want to get to with it. And often they're people who are a little bit jaded with what they're doing, right? They're a bit
Yeah. A
kind of,
little.
they're ready to go.
Very.
Yeah. And if that's the case, it's often with one of the people we worked with, they realized that the idea they'd been talking about for 5 years was just not going to fly. And we just couldn't see any real path to sort of monetization, what have you. And they got this renewed passion, and suddenly they were kind of all in on their job and they were focused. And she reached out to us a couple of weeks ago and was just off. She'd got a promotion and it was all good. And we were like, okay, that's fantastic, right?
Awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a
And
win.
we've had another one who, it was a terrible idea as well, and we knew it was a bad idea from the start, but they were just desperate to quit their job, and they came back to us 3 months later with a completely different idea. And now that they've just hired their third employee, they're based in an office out of Singapore. They're doing sort of corporate secretarial and stuff in a different way in the Asian market, and it's a huge success. We're like, this is amazing, like great stuff. So those are
Awesome.
some of the kind of the traits and the things we look for and the kind of personality types that kind of we're interested in.
So you exited a company and you must have made some money to do that. Hopefully you made a lot of money. Like that's the real hope. And I mean that sincerely, right?
Yep.
I'm not joking around. So
Yep.
do you take your own money and invest as well? Like does DQ have a fund, or do you syndicate, or do you do both?
So
Do you know what I mean?
kind of both. So we initially had an investment fund, and we were putting money into startups as well, alongside external investors. But we found that there's a little bit of a sort of a conflict of interest, because we had sort of a vested interest in our little fund putting money into startups to attract others, and it kind of there were some companies where, we just wanted to be completely objective. So we actually folded the fund into DQ, and we now spend a lot more money on the startups themselves. So we will build MVPs, we'll kind of put a lot more time and effort and sort of financial contribution into the startup.
Right.
And then we seek external investment from angel networks. So we do think that kind of 500,000 to a million is often what a startup needs to really kind of get it to that next level. If we can grow organically and we can see a path to customers and revenue quite quickly, then that's brilliant as well. But we've got a fairly sort of close network across the globe, UK, Australia, Europe, and sort of some links in the US, of people who kind of understand the DQ model. They've seen it work with the likes of Antler, Entrepreneur First. They're in a similar sort of space, I guess. They, 0 to 1 investors.
Kind of. Yeah.
But they're more focused about, you want to be an entrepreneur, you've quit your job, here you are, you're thrown together with a bunch of other people and a bunch of ideas, and you're going to make it work no matter what.
That's Antler, yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely Antler.
We're sort of the alternative is, hey, don't make that big bet just yet. What's the little bet? What can you do today to really establish that there's something there's something there, and then ultimately kind of run a business.
Does DQ feel like it has what's the right word, like a vertical focus, where if somebody comes in a specific space, you're like, this is our bread and butter. We know this thing inside and out, and that's going to work, or this is not going to work. Like, what would you say the vertical focus is? And I'm not saying you just invest in that, but like that thing comes in and you're like, yeah, we know this space. What would that be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're basically tech entrepreneurs. So our background is tech. James has sort of 90 startup investments, predominantly, sector agnostic, but very much focused on a technology side of things.
Got it.
Kind of fundamental business processes and technologies where we add value. So SaaS, at the moment, SaaS is kind of in this topsy-turvy world of everybody's got 22 different things they're paying $7.99 a month for, and nobody really knows where they come from. And I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in that space.
For sure.
So we very much sit in what can we do to add value? How can we help? So it is a little bit sort of a technology focus. I mean, there's been some really interesting stuff happening in kind of med tech and sort of medical space, and people building clinics, particularly in the US, trying to understand how to kind of put that sort of thing together. We've had 2 or 3 really interesting conversations around that. And again, from our perspective, it's how can we use technology to help someone who might not be that technically minded to create a sort of a platform, and then the foundations of a business that scales and that kind of goes forward. I mean, if it's farming in Wyoming or in Northern Australia, then that's kind of thing we might struggle with. But fundamentally, it's technology companies that we can help you kind of grow and scale. We've got sort of expertise in kind of taking things outside of initial place and then expanding across the world as well. So that's a big part of how we view the future and help founders see what the possibilities are.
So one of the things you said earlier was, you joined a venture capitalist. Investable, everybody knows, like it's a company that I've definitely heard of. I think I've probably had some of their portfolio companies on my show as well. So it's a well-known thing. And this is a comment not just on them, but on VC at scale. You said you were working there and you were like, do I really want to say no 99 times? Like, is that how I want to live my life, right? It's like if you have kids, like you have a daughter, right? So you have kids and you want to say yes to them, right? You want to be happy. You want to create, you want to help them. If your daughter comes and says, hey, Dad, can I do this? You don't want to be like, no. You want to be the guy that says yes. At least I am, right? I've got a daughter as well. So that's why I said that. But the model that they have is very, very different from your model, right? And to get to a point where you can say yes, you also want to be in a place where you feel like there's an end goal and an end purpose to what you're doing, right? Like they're investing other people's money to get a 5 times return and then just go home. Like that's their only thing. But what you're trying to do is different because you're trying to change people's lives. And I'm wondering if there's that's what it feels like to me, right? Yeah. And I always say, like you said before, like if you're 58 years old and your company doesn't work, going back and getting a job is going to be hard. I would make the case that you are, and people like you are completely unhireable. Not because you're not smart and not because you don't work hard, but because you've already built something yourself. And it's very hard for someone to come in and go, okay, Oliver, today I want you to work on this thing and I want the report by Friday. Just like, that's not the way this is meant to work. And that's not the way I want to work. Does it feel like you have purpose again in the same way that like when you first started your company, you're like, oh, I love this. I cannot wait
Yeah,
to write this code or do this thing. Do you
yeah.
have that feeling again?
100%. I mean, that's exactly my the passion for DQ. It was interesting because, like you said, we sold the business in 2017. I took a year off. My kids were still young, so my wife
Yeah,
was
yeah,
still working. Played a bit of golf and stuff, and I wasn't bored. But you kind of it's hard. You're in the office every day. You build something. You've got
yeah.
400 people who know what your name is and know your email address and
Right.
that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you don't anymore, and you're back to your Gmail account.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, and I think one of the challenges with any VC at the moment is not necessarily kind of that they say no over and over again. It's that the type of companies or the types of entrepreneurs that are asking for funding and will put anything on a form to get to that first kind of conversation with me as the guy on the ground.
Yeah.
Within the first couple of minutes that if they'd spent more than 2 minutes looking at what Investable's criteria were
Right.
and what they were looking for, that it was
They
probably
were in the
going to be
wrong
a no.
place. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
the challenge I have is that I kind of like those conversations and I like hearing about their businesses, but I would know straight away that they weren't right. They either didn't have anything that Investable wanted or they were in the wrong space, whatever it might be. And
Right.
yet I would still have those conversations with founders and I'd still love to hear about what they were doing and where the next customer was coming from and why they needed, $1 million. And so I think it was more a reflection on me and just my lack
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
fit for that kind of VC thing. But I think the companies that, I mean, I think I met with 160 companies in 9 months, and two of them actually got investment out of Singapore. And that's not a bad ratio. I mean, most VCs will
No.
meet 3 or 4 thousand in a year and probably invest in 10. So,
Yep.
so for me, it was just about sort of the way in which I approach things. And I mean, Investable is something I mean, like you said, they're very well known. They've hit
Yep.
a really interesting sweet spot that they're
Yep.
sort of they're where we would love to get DQ companies to in order to put in front of Investable.
Yeah.
That's our
Exactly.
primary goal. Is I know
Right.
what Investable's looking for, and I know that it makes an awful lot of sense. And they've backed some fantastic companies and continue.
Yeah.
I'm in their fund caveat, so
Right. Right. No,
um,
no, I want to be clear about this. I wasn't making a value judgment
no, I get that.
on
I
that
get
at
that. I
all. I
just,
want to be very clear about this.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And I think, no, I totally agree. But I still think that no matter what you're saying, any VC, 99.9% of the time, the answer is no, and that for
Yep.
whatever reason it might be. And I 100% agree with you. I think the interesting thing is, what can we do to be in that 0.1%? How can we don't even want to be putting our portfolio companies in touch with anyone until we're pretty we're 100% certain that there's a good chance they may invest. And that still doesn't mean our hit rate's going to be wonderful, but we've kind of understood where we need to get businesses to and what we need to show so that they have this best possible chance. And but in doing that, like you said, you realize that they can sort of bypass that early stage investment opportunity because they've won the right customers. And like you said,
Yep.
your revenue's growing, the business is continuing to expand. You can see where it's heading. And sometimes the question is, well, why would I take on money at this point? And if there isn't
Yeah.
a valid reason for that, then we're all, I mean, we bootstrapped Tigerspike for 8 years. So when we're working with these founders who've only been doing their companies for sort of 9 months or a year, my advice is, hold off on VC for as long as you can,
Yeah.
if that's the way to go. I think, but if it is a path to sort of accelerating the business and getting it to a level where it's sort of self-sustaining, then it makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. Okay. Look, I feel like I said this about 20 minutes ago. I feel like I can keep going for hours.
Yeah, you pick a
Because
topic.
there's so much to talk about. Yeah. But let's do this. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to thank you for doing this, but I'm going to make an offer to you. You
Okay.
said you invested or you work with 18 companies. I think you
Yep.
said 3 of them got funding, but 6 of them I think you're still working with, but you turned down 30. So it's about a third, a little bit more than a third you work with. I'll offer to you, like, take your best companies, put them on my show. Right? I mean,
Okay.
frankly, I think you should have your own show where you're talking to your own companies. But no, because your conversations with them would be way better, right? Because you know them so much better than I do. But
Yeah.
I have a gigantic audience. So what I'm
This is true.
offering to you is give me some of your great companies. I'd love to have
Okay.
conversations with them because it's a different kind of startup than the startups that I normally talk to. Different
Yeah.
age group, and also guys and gals that said, I have a great job, but I worked with DQ and I got to a place where I could quit. So for a
Yeah.
company that was telling me don't quit, but I did quit, I want to talk to those guys and gals because it must mean something you're doing is working, and I want to learn how from them. Is that cool?
Absolutely. I mean, just a very brief story on that. So there's
Go for it.
a lady we've been working with. Um, She had three. She's a mother. She has three young children, and she was in London. And her husband had to fly back to Australia, sort of super urgently. And she was there for her best friend's wedding. And she either had to leave with her husband and fly back to Australia, or stay. But then she wasn't. She had no idea how she was going to get back from London to Sydney with three kids under the age of 4.
Oh
So
my
she
God.
put a shout out on Facebook, and it got sort of national coverage and what have you. And she found a Brazilian girl who happened to be flying from London to Sydney, was an au pair based in London, and she paid half of her ticket. And so this lady helped her on the flight and kind of entertained her kids, and she was able to go to a friend's wedding and then fly back from Sydney to London. And so she came to us and said, I work, this is my experience. I'm
Yep.
doing digital strategy for a company in Australia, but I think this is a great idea, and there must be more people like me. And we loved it. We thought it was great. So we've set up, so her company is called Journey. And so this week, her first journeys are happening. She's got a bunch of people who are
So cool.
assisting people who need. So basically, it's people who have a need, whether it's an anxious flyer, or you need to bring your elderly parents over, or you need help with your kids, whatever it might be, and somebody who's looking to kind of save costs and maybe get paid half their ticket, or paid $500 towards the flight. And it's kind of a platform that puts them together, basically. And the stories and the people who are actually meeting each other and flying together and spending 8 hours on a plane to Singapore or what have you is just amazing. Like, it's got this amazing feel good story because it's enabling people to travel who couldn't. It's helping people out. It's helping both sides. So there's so many different things. And she is at that kind of inflection point. So she's got a
I
brilliant
love
idea.
it.
She hasn't, it needs to get to scale in order to monetize it. And there's a bunch of challenges associated with the business, but in a few months' time, I would love for you to have a
Yeah.
chat with her and just understand that story, because you talk about passion and the reason of getting into a business, and she's someone who just epitomizes the right reasons to start a company. And we've been working with her for almost a year now, and putting both, it's a dual-sided marketplace. There's a number of challenges, but put it all together, and I think she would be a wonderful, wonderful person for you to talk to.
I would love to, and I'll give you just a free opinion if you don't mind. You want to know what's going to help that business grow like crazy?
What's that?
If you do a show about it. You're laughing.
I know,
You're laughing, but imagine the conversations that happen on that flight for the first time. You're a Brazilian au pair. You're dealing with this Australian lady. You can't just sit there and do nothing on the flight. You got to play with the kids or do something. Like, the show could just be called Journey, or What Was the Flight Like? Because that conversation would be so cool.
Yeah,
that would be so cool. I'd love to hear that. Anyway, I'd love to meet her. Correct. It was awesome talking to you. Oliver Palmer, a co-founder in DQ Ventures. You were awesome. I cannot thank you enough for doing this.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.